Hello. How's everyone? Hello. How are you doing today? Good. All right, well, I'm going to give it one more minute and then I'm going to get started. Hey. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So, a lot of people couldn't join yesterday's the radio program, but this is actually a spinoff of the radio show. So yesterday on the radio show, we talked about the whole concept of rest and rest being a prerequisite for marriage. And this minister was giving some advice to this young man that he should choose to look for rest as a prerequisite for marriage. Because the young man was saying, you know, he's struggling, he's tired. When he come home, he don't want to do no work. He don't want to have to work hard. And so in that, it was, the minister gave the example of when God put Adam to sleep, he was resting. And so when his wife came, he was in a restful state. And basically was telling him, if you're ready for your wife, you should be resting. And I was like, that's very dangerous to give that analogy, because when I started looking at men throughout the scriptures that were husbands, they worked. And so even with Adam, as I stated, he's right. Adam was put to sleep. He was resting. When he woke up, Eve was there. Adam woke up with more responsibility than he had when he went to sleep. He now had the responsibility of leadership, stewardship, protection, provision. And so we know that because Adam said, this is flesh of my flesh, bone of my bone. So she's mine. We're one. And so Eve also, she became his partner. She was his helpmeet. And so with that, so I don't want to go into all of Tuesday, but I wanted to give some background, and I wanted to give some background also I said, well, then I thought about Jacob, and we know that Jacob was on the run when he met Rachel, right? And he worked 14 years in total for her. And then we know that, then I thought about Boaz, and Ruth came with a whole lot of baggage. Because even when he went to the redeemer that was closer to her, he said, listen, you can get this field, but you got to take her on too. And he was like, no, I can't do that. That's going to upset what I already got going on. You marry her. And so he took on her responsibility, her baggage, if you want to use the word baggage. Again, I'm just making that and stating there was responsibility. I don't see rest. But then I saw another video. Someone sent me a video, and they were just on here. I don't know if they're still on here or not, but they sent me a video, and this was something that, if you've been raised in the church, I don't care what church, I know you have heard this. And it's always been said that wives, you are to submit to your husband as your husband is being led by Christ. Now, put something in there if y'all done heard that. Whatever. Just acknowledge that y'all done heard that. And I was like, the lady said, that's not in the scriptures. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. Because I've been hearing that my whole life. And I didn't read the Bible. And I'm like, nah. So when she was like, and if you can find something different, drop it in the scripture. Give me that exact verse that says a woman is to submit to her husband as he's being led by God. And I said, I looked and I looked and I looked. It wasn't there. It was not there. So then I said, okay, God, I'm getting these videos for a reason. So there's something you want me to glean from this. So I started down the search. And so don't get me wrong, the concept is in there, right? But it's not in there that way. And so then I went to Ephesians 5 verses. I started at verse 21. Ephesians 5 verse 21. And it tells us to submit one to another as reverence to Christ. So now that's husbands and wives are submitting one to another as reverence to Christ. Then in Ephesians 5:22, it says, wives, submit yourself to your own husbands as you do unto the Lord. As you do unto the Lord. Okay. Then Ephesians 5:23 says, the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, of which he is the Savior. And we know that the body is the church. So I'm like, okay. Then in Ephesians 5:24, it says, as the church submits to Christ, so should the wife submit to her husband. Okay, it says the church submits unto Christ, so should the wife submit to her husband. Okay. Then it says in Ephesians 5:25, husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave up his life for her. And I was like, I kept reading them. I went to different translations because I was determined to see that verse, see it in there like I have been taught. And the reality is I had to take a step back and I had to say, submission doesn't, my submission to my husband is not based on him being led by Christ. My submission to my husband is based on my relationship with Christ. Because Ephesians 5:21 says, 5:22, wives, submit yourselves to your own husband as you do unto the Lord. I was like, oh God. So there's a connection between how I submit to Christ and how I submit to my husband. And then I started thinking. So, I wasn't ready. I was like, So the more I started thinking about, okay, what's an example of a wife that submitted? And I thought about Abigail. And we don't talk about Abigail a whole lot. And Abigail, the whole story of Abigail is, the part I'm going to talk about is in 1 Samuel chapter 25. And so we know she's married to Nabal, and he's off the hook. He's off the hook. His name means fool. That's how crazy he is. He was mean and he was surly and he was a fool. And we see that in 1 Samuel 25:25. And it says, so what ended up happening, make a long story short. So David and his men were, they kind of had kept an eye out for over his men and his property, and over his property. And the whole time they were there, nothing happened to the men, nothing happened to their property. They didn't lose anything. And so now David is shearing time, and he was like, listen, go see if we can get some food. We're hungry. And this is the time that they would shear the sheep. So he sends 10 young men to go to Nabal, and he's like, David? I don't know no David. I don't even know a Jesse. Jesse is David's dad. So he like, I don't know you. I don't know your daddy. You know, it's like The Color Purple. I don't know her. I don't know her either. You know, it's just, I don't know none of y'all. I don't know these people. And so David's like, okay. So his boys come back to him, tell him what's happened. David is hotter than fish grease. He's mad. And so David's like, look here. I'm going to make sure that before the sun rises, may God deal with me if him and all the men that belong to him aren't killed. God, you deal with me if I don't make this happen. And so one of the servants comes to Abigail, and she do a Miss Bonita. Now, you ain't heard this from me, but your husband then gave insults to the king, well, he wasn't quite the king yet, to David, and it's about to be a whole problem. Well, no, he was the king. I'm sorry. And it's about to be a whole problem. So she's like, okay. So she gets all this food together, and she goes before David, and she's like, listen, my husband's a fool. His name means fool. Can you please are you able to just take away the wrath that you have and just spare us? Because listen, he not well. He a little touched in the head. So David's like, okay, for you, I'll call a stand down. So he tells his men, stand down. When she returns home, this man is partying like it's 1999. They drinking, they having just the gay old time, right? And so it comes morning, and she tells her husband what happens. When she tells him what happens, it says he becomes as stone, and about 10 days later, he dies. And then when David hears word that he dies, he then takes Abigail as one of his wives. And I know y'all like, Monique, what does that would be the opposite of submission, because she went the opposite of what her husband had her to do. But when we go back to that Ephesians 5:22, I keep wanting to say 21, 5:22, wives, submit to your own husband as you do unto the Lord. She knew that David was a man of God, and she knew that all David had to do was just give a whistle, and God was going to make it happen. He was going to mount up. It was going to be a for real problem, and she knew that it was going to disturb not just her husband, but the households of her servants and everybody. Because he said all the men that's attached to him going to die. And so I wanted to talk about Jezebel as well, because Jezebel was the opposite of this. Maybe we'll do that next week. But this just had me start to think about, as much as you may want something, are you really ready for the very ask? Am I really submitting myself unto God? And if I'm not submitting myself unto God, if I'm not bringing myself into submission under God's will, how on earth can I be a wife? And so, especially a godly wife, because it's wives. You could be a wife, but would you be a godly wife? Would you be that Proverbs 31 woman? And so, as much as I talked about, like I said on the radio show, about the responsibility men have, we have a responsibility as well. But That's all I really wanted to. It's other points I was gonna make, but I'm gonna leave it at that because we're already 15 minutes in. But I just wanted us to just kind of just think about how much you're submitting to God. And is your submission to your husband a reflection of the submission that you have for Christ? Because that's what the scriptures say it should look like. It should be a straight reflection. So I thank you guys for joining. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I have a big surprise coming up. I got a couple surprises. But you guys have already seen that I am doing the Ghana trip. So if you're interested in Ghana, please go on my Facebook page. You'll be able to see all the information. I have traveled with this lady several times. She's amazing. And I got a couple other things, but I'm going to hold off until they're all put together. I don't want to put the cart before the horse. So, but I thank you guys for all your support. Please, please, please listen to the radio station. It's www.kpmradio.com, and it's on Tuesdays. It's noon Central Standard Time and 1 p.m. Eastern Time, and that's on Tuesdays. And then it repeats at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time and 10 p.m. Eastern Time. So, all right. Let me know in the comments if you want me to do Jezebel and do the correlation of the two, or if you want me just to talk about something completely different, because Jezebel was something else. I will say this, I remember my grandmother on my dad's side, she would tell us we couldn't wear red fingernail polish, we couldn't wear red lipstick because we had a spirit of Jezebel. But Jezebel wasn't a harlot. She was something out cold though. Jezebel was something. It's a reason. It's a reason that we don't see little girls with the name Jezebel. You see all these, names of Esther and all these names in the Bible, but I ain't never met a Jezebel. But Jezebel was something ruthless. But we can dissect that next week if you would like. Just let me know in the comments. All right, guys. I love you guys so much. And thank you so much for chiming in. All right. Bye.